Hello and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Memories. I am Wax the Brain Hussain and joined by Fash the $1,000,000 fan. Please bear with us today in case we have any IT issues at all. We'll try and iron them out in the editing, but already we've had to start the show 3 times, Fash.
Yeah, I mean, you need to pay for your broadband, Wax. You know, all these freebies are catching up on you. But yeah, hi, we are back. And what a show we've got lined up today, Wax. It's one that's been really building up for a number of months.
It's the show that you thought you would never see. It's SummerSlam 1992. When we initially kicked off the whole, idea of doing this podcast, I think this show was right up there in terms of one of the abiding memories that we had. And we thought, let's kick off in 92 and go. We ended up going back a year further than we expected. But yeah, glad to finally be at SummerSlam 92, being held obviously in London, in the UK. So it was a big show for us and a big show for our memories. And talking about memories, Fash, what sort of memories do you recall having, back in the day?
Yeah, so as you say, we thought this would be episode number 3 or 4 when we started this 8 months ago, but there was just so much to talk about. But when we talk about our really first, I think, vivid memories, we talked about WrestleMania 8 a little bit before that, Survivor Series. We remembered bits, the Royal Rumble, but this is the one that I remember everyone just being so engrossed in WWF, and it's really interesting because in the US the business was waning, and one of the reasons they were here was because it was so hot in the UK. But a number of memories. So I think what I remember really vividly, right, is when this card was announced, there was an ice cream man, Wax, that used to come into my area every single evening. And it was one of your run-of-the-mill ice cream vans. But then on one summer afternoon when it was pretty hot, a new ice cream van came. It was shinier, it was bigger, and it had better ice cream. But what else they had as well was wrestling cards. And what I remember is they had SummerSlam 1992 wrestling cards. So this was months before the event was taking place. And then I think a month out, you got updated ones. And essentially, I remember them. There was a mixture of cards which just had the bouts. So you had Warrior against Macho Man, you had Bret Hart against British Bulldog. So you collected those, and then you also had kind of individual wrestler cards. So I remember they were a big thing. The man would turn up, and we all wanted to buy a packet of these cards. Now, unfortunately, this ice cream man was encroaching on the other van's territory, and suddenly, just as SummerSlam came and went, this van came and went as well. And it was basically, we never heard from it again, but it was a shame because it did give us one of my first memories of SummerSlam 1992. Do you remember these cards, Wax? Did you come across them?
I remember wrestling cards, but I couldn't pick out the relevant year because they were around for a while.
Because you had the main ones, right, which we were talked about in our first episode, which were the kind of assorted ones, which were not really linked to anything. I don't know if these were specific for the UK, but as I say, they were a special edition. And I'm sure our viewers and listeners, there'll be people, amongst those listeners and viewers that will remember these. They were very much a collector's item. So give us feedback if you do remember them, and I'm not just inventing this. The other memory I remember as well is, just the hype in general, Wax. It was on the news, it was on TV shows, children's TV, that SummerSlam was coming to Wembley Stadium. And I remember Rowdy Roddy Piper showing up just before the event. I think it was a week or so before it, on a show that was called Going Live. I think it was called back on BBC Saturday mornings. It was the show that was a precursor to Live and Kicking later on. So UK fans will know what I'm talking about. But Piper appeared on that, and they asked him about the event. And he said that he thought Macho Man would beat the Ultimate Warrior and that the British Bulldog would beat Bret Hart. And he didn't really say he was appearing at it, but he alluded to it. So those are two big memories. But on top of that, in general, it was just a chat in the playground. Everyone was really looking forward to this and wished they could be in London for the big event. How about yourself? There's anything that comes to mind?
Oh, certainly the children's shows and the morning shows that you used to get up and watch. There was a lot of mention of wrestling on those shows. But more than anything, actually, I remember the hype that I had myself to come home early from school and watch the show, because I didn't watch it live. Strangely, this was a show that aired live in the UK on a Saturday, but in the US it didn't air for 2 days later.
Yep.
And it's one that I had recorded. Something that I didn't manage to watch on the Sunday for whatever reason. But I remember coming home earlier than normal from school and just setting myself up in front of the TV in the main living room, nobody to bother me. Everybody knew it was wrestling time, and just watching the show start to finish. That's my the longest memory that I have.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you that. I couldn't remember if this was also live in the UK, which would make sense, right? Because it was during the day. Because I saw it, I think, a couple of days later. And I saw it this was one of the two events that I saw across homes. So I saw a bit of it in one home, then I went to someone else's house to watch the rest of it. I remember watching the main event in a third house. It's still, it's in my mind. But as you say, one of the unique aspects here was the fact that it was shot on the Saturday, but the audience in the US saw it on the Monday. Now, you couldn't do that now with the internet, but back in 1992, nobody was really going to spoil that. So this is really interesting in terms of, going back 30 years and to where we are today, where you just couldn't do that at all.
It's one of the reasons that there hasn't been a major pay-per-view in the
Yeah.
UK since then, because there just doesn't seem to be a way to work around this whole timing issue. You can't have a show here starting at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's just unworkable for the US audience.
Yeah.
And you can't have one starting 7, 8 in the evening, because that's just too early for US times. But
Yep.
there are rumors, Fash, that a
Yep.
30-year anniversary could be coming back to the UK SummerSlam, that is. And especially not even London, but Cardiff, of all places.
Yeah, the big stadium. Is it still called the Millennium Stadium?
The Millennium or the Principality, I can't remember
Yeah,
how they
so
refer
that's
to it.
the rumor. So when we think about would they return to the UK, that's the rumor that next year we're going to get the 30-year anniversary. So they will look around those. I guess now the way WWE is, they do Crown Jewel, so they don't really care. They do that in Saudi Arabia, and you just got to deal with it on the WWE network. And as you say, there's never been another major pay-per-view on these shores. Of course, we've had our own one night onlys, Insurrection, etc. But I think it will be huge if they do it. I mean, is the popularity at the same level? I would say no, not as hot as it was then or as it was in the Attitude Era, but there's still a lot of people that will, turn up, because even now when they come to town in the UK for the shows, they're jam-packed. So if they can pull that off, I think it will be amazing and a bit of a renaissance for UK fans, and something unique as well for the US audience, because one thing that we'll talk about, this event just looks so damn good and the crowd is so hyped. And I think that's why everyone has such fond memories of it, just because of the location, the look, and how hot the crowd is.
Absolutely. So let's get this review started, Fash. Let's jump back to SummerSlam 1992. Okay, Fash, let's kick off SummerSlam 1992, held in London, England, of course, with an amazing audience of 80,000. That's actual 80,000, not one of those made-up numbers.
Not WrestleMania 3?
No, not one of those made-up numbers. Even Dave Meltzer gave that one the thumbs up. 80,355 fans in attendance. That's an amazing crowd for any event, but especially a wrestling event.
And to be honest, they could have filled 180,000 in there. This show was sold really quickly. Once again, looking at the technology of the time, everyone just wanted to be here. It was huge, and said it in the intro, it just looks so damn good. When this show opened and you had Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan there with his crown as the King of England, just the fact that I love these kind of shows because it's starting off at daytime, the sun was out, which isn't always the case in the UK, and then as you go on, night falls. So I just thought it looked great and yet jam-packed.
Yeah, and it opens with some very traditional British style music.
That was terrible. That was just terrible.
Let's remember, this is 1992, right? So everything is slightly more
rubbish.
timely, and and the one thing I really noticed was how young the audience was. In the opening shots, it's very, very young crowds outside making a lot of noise. And no surprise they were using the kids programs to make this event work.
Can I just say one thing about this, because you've reminded me of a classic moment that both of us have missed when you mentioned the crowd and the kids. There's one specific kid when you watch the show.
I haven't forgotten, Fash.
You haven't forgotten. You were going to get
no, go for it. You go for it.
Yeah, I was just seeing the little boy outside who says the British Bulldog's going to win, whether he wants to or not. The first heel turn of the event.
Yeah, I think he froze under the pressure.
It's a great line. We're still talking about it 30 odd years later on.
Yeah, the show comes from the outside to the inside, and then we hear some trumpeters going off as if this was a medieval castle or something in the UK. Pictures of Westminster and Big Ben, just showing really how different a feel this event had to a normal US city. Obviously, the second biggest crowd in attendance. The look, which you mentioned, Fash, earlier, it's an arena show, but it just looks massive, doesn't it? It's like one of the first times you get to see that full arena, the way they shot it.
Yeah, and this was not happening in the US. So one of the reasons they moved here, they knew they could fill this up. In the US, leading up to this wax, we've seen the shows again. The crowds were getting small, and the venues were smaller, and they just wouldn't have been able to draw such a crowd in the US. So it really gave the WWF a big time look as well.
Yep, and obviously, as you noted, we're kicking off with the commentators, the announcers, Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan, who I thought had been missing from TV for a while prior to this. I don't recall him being on because it was Mr. Perfect and Vince for most of the shows.
So Heenan used to do Wrestling Challenge. So that was the distinction. He and Gorilla Monsoon used to do Wrestling Challenge as opposed to Superstars. So I certainly did catch him, in some, but as you say, Superstars used to be Vince McMahon and Mr. Perfect. So he was there and he was doing some stuff in the background, I guess, with Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect. But yeah, he wasn't on the A show at the time.
Yep. And interestingly, again, we had a few dark matches, which is an interesting point to note here because they weren't shown, on the UK presentation of this show, but they were shown in the US.
Well, they weren't, Wax. I'm going to dispute this now. We're going to get into it first. What I heard, and I could be wrong, is that the UK one had one match later on, but the US one didn't either. And it was actually later on. They did a Coliseum home release, which had all 11 matches. And the US audience actually didn't see these because they were for the audience in the arena. Certainly 2 of the matches. But I'll let you talk a little bit more about them.
Well, we're just going to run through the results for them. It's Papa Shango beats El Matador, Tatanka beats Berserker, Bushwhackers and Jim Duggan beats the Nasty Boys and the Mountie. Fans probably thinking, we dodged a bullet there. Some terrible wrestlers included in that. But then, if you're in the audience, you're probably loving the fact that you can see everybody that was, quite big on TV over the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, but it goes back to the couple of shows. Please go back, check them out in the archives. Papa Shango, talk about a fall from grace. He's feuding in the main feud with the Ultimate Warrior, and now he's basically in one of the dark matches, and he beats El Matador, but it's a nothing match. In terms of Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Bushwhackers against the Nasty Boys and the Mountie, I think it's nice for the crowd to see this, but I see a pretty nothing match. And okay, you see some, characters there. The third match actually, Wax, the talk about Tatanka Berserker was okay, but it wasn't as a dark match at the beginning. And you might notice this if you go and catch it online, but it was later on. It was actually after the WWE title match. And they had that, and that's why we moved from that match to the next one a little bit abruptly on the TV show. So that came later on, and some rumors say that was supposed to be part of the main show, but they just didn't have time for it. I guess just one final point I'll make about these dark matches. Initially, it was announced that Texas Tornado would take on Papa Shango, but Texas Tornado got into his own personal issues again, and actually we wouldn't see him again in a WWF ring, which was obviously tragic given what happened to him some months later on. But yeah, that was the first couple of matches, one dark match later on. But let's get to the first match, Wax. It's that pop people want to hear, and you love that pop.
I do. It's that Road Warrior, the Legion of Doom pop. But before them, it's Money Inc. who are coming out to the ring. I don't know if Fash, you have your
I don't.
IRS
this is the thing. I don't have IRS in my. I couldn't find them, but we had the LOD here.
I just want to point out a couple of lines from Bobby Heenan as they're making their entrances. He goes, as Money Inc. are coming down. When the Bank of England needs a money line, they come to this tag team, which I thought was pretty funny. And if you British paid your taxes, you wouldn't burden the royal family.
That's the IRS, wasn't it? Was that IRS that said that bit?
The IRS that said it in the ring, as he does when he grabs a mic. And then, as you know, we then get that huge pop for Legion of Doom coming to the ring, who looking, pretty classy as usual. And this time, especially so since they're riding these huge bikes to the ring.
This is one of my big memories, and I think this is a memory people have. Not so much of the match, but just that cool entrance on the motorbikes. Now, I think they might have done it in WCW a few times. I hadn't seen it. I think most hadn't seen it before. And just coming down that long aisle on these motorbikes, and they had the gold spikes, which I wish I would have had a pair of those. Just a really badass entry into the match. And, that's going to get the crowd hot. Road Warrior pop. I mean, the crowd's going to be hot all night, but this was just a perfect, twosome to start things off with. And then we get into a match, but I guess, I'll let you kick off, but there's a story behind the match, which is more interesting than actually what we saw in the ring.
Nowadays, Fash, the opening match is something that a lot of competitors want to be involved in. They really want to get the crowd going and start the show off hot. But back in the 1990s, it probably wasn't thought of that way. It's more of a, it's almost a pecking order, the order that you come in a pay-per-view. So it's very surprising to see one of your biggest, hottest acts like the Legion of Doom coming out to open the show against a pretty well-established tag team in Money Inc. as well. So 4 guys there that are probably thinking, you know what short straw did we draw to have to open this match? And maybe you can talk to us a little bit to explain maybe why this was the opening match.
Yeah, so there's probably 2 schools of thought. I mean, one would just be that they want to get the show off to a hot start. So you bring out the LOD. And I think that was one of the reasons. And I think that's why I worked here. But what we learned after this sometime was the Hawk was in a bad shape. I mean, this was originally supposed to be the tag team title match, if you remember, but the Money Incorporated lost the titles on a house show to the Natural Disasters. Once again, not on television. And this is what the tag team division has been a mess for a number of months. But going back to it, Hawk's been a central point of this, just his personal issues. So they put the match on first. It's not a title match. And what we hear was actually Hawk was pretty bad shape throughout the day as well. And interestingly, Animal said later on, when they came out on the motorbikes, Hawk had parked too closely to Animal. So he had to get off the other way. And he said he actually burned his leg and had to wrestle with an injury. Whereas Hawk, I mean, watching this match, he seems a bit off pace, doesn't he? And I think probably they were like, just get out there, do what you can. And let's close the door here on this. But I don't think you could tell completely there was something wrong. I mean, I saw a couple of movements from Hawk. He misses a clothesline and goes outside.
That was a really cool spot, and I've never seen that before or after.
But I thought that was by mistake, though. I think this is because he wasn't all there, and that's why he went for it, because you see Animal kind of looking towards him as well. So initially I thought that's a really cool spot, but then I thought, this is probably to do with the fact that he wasn't totally there. But I mean, that's the story behind it. Hawk had his issues, and that led to this not being a title match, and also maybe the fact that it was the opener, aside from getting the big pop for the crowd.
Yeah, I think Bret Hart notes in his book at the very beginning of the show, he walks into the changing room and he's just looking at Hawk downing 3 Placidils, which are these really strong painkillers or over-the-counter medicines, before the match. And then how was he allowed to jump on a motorbike and come down the ramp completely high, and probably an unsafe working environment for Money Inc. there. But yeah, again, I would say you don't really notice that much.
Yeah.
Until you know what you're looking out for, and you only know that after the event, really. And there's a moment at the end of the match where he comes in the ring and then he has to go back out the ring and he doesn't really know where he's supposed to be. But yeah, I thought during the match, you couldn't really tell how off he was, but we know he was in a lot of trouble, and his own sort of demons were coming to the fore.
Yeah, and it's a standard tag team match, isn't it? It's got your kind of simple formula. The crowd was really into it, but in terms of it wasn't really memorable. And as you say, you can't really tell there's issues as you watch it. You got some great workers in there. One telling sign probably is that it doesn't end with the Doomsday device. They kind of go for an IRS, stops it from happening, I think, and then we move to our finish. But I guess what were your overall views in this? Because it ends with Animal hits a power slam or a kind of follow-away slam and gets the pin. And what were your overall thoughts on this as the opener of the event?
Made this match pretty hot, especially towards the end. I thought during, there was sleeper after sleeper, which took it down a notch. But towards the end of the match, the crowd really got into it, and they didn't do the Doomsday Device, which is one of the best moves in all of wrestling. But they managed to finish off Ted DiBiase for the win, and the crowd were really happy with that result.
Yeah, it was a great way to start things. But then we don't get a post-match celebration. Really, probably just got out the ring, but as a LOD fan, and you remember I was a huge LOD fan as a kid, this is it, Lex, because it just doesn't end there for Hawk. What happens after this is even more, crazy. Hawk doesn't return to the US. There are rumors that he joined the London part of the Hells Angels and went away with them.
Somebody. He fell in love with somebody in the chapter in London.
Yeah, supposedly, and basically he doesn't return. He didn't want to go to rehab. Supposedly Vince McMahon wanted him to go and get himself sorted out. So Animal returns, and then there's a little bit of a limbo. And what at the time I'd heard in the playground, and I hadn't seen any footage of this, and I still haven't seen any footage in terms of televised stuff, But for a little while, Animal was actually teaming up with another wrestler in house shows in Germany. And maybe there was some in the US as well, but I've seen a very grainy version of him teaming up with another guy against the Beverly brothers in Germany. Do you know who that was, Wax?
I don't, Fash.
It was Crush. So check it out. They come out as a team. So Crush can say that for a little while he was part of Demolition and Legion of Doom, but unfortunately it doesn't go anywhere. What happens is in another show, Animal is in a handicap match against the Beverly brothers and he injures his back. Now, this is the injury which is going to keep him out of commission till about 1996. He's going to take that Lloyd's of London insurance policy, and that's it for the team. Hawk's going to show up in WCW Japan. He's going to have our alternative team, but we won't see these guys again until 1996 in WCW, and certainly we won't see them in WWF again till 1997. And just going back to this back, so we once again didn't have a clue what was going on behind the scenes here. So 1 minute you see the LOD, you're jacked up thinking they'll go for the tag team titles next, and that's it. We don't see him on television again.
Yeah, it's a massive shame because they were a huge tag team. And if both of them, or especially if Hawk had kept on the straight and narrow, they could have had an amazing career, an even more amazing career than they did.
Yeah. And you watched the NWA a lot, and so did Hawk on his own could have been such a big star as a single star. I think he was the more talented of the two. And as you say, it's just such a shame. They will return as a team, and hopefully we'll document that when the time comes. But this event closes a chapter on the Legion of Doom, as it will close the chapter on several names. But going back to it, it's a big shame. But at the time, we loved the entrance, we loved the victory, and we were looking for more in the coming weeks after this.
Yeah, moving on, Fash, we see a promo with Ric Flair and Mean Gene. The first question I had seen this was, why is he in his gear since he doesn't have a match on this show? Smartly, Mean Gene has the same question for him, and Ric Flair says he's ready for anything. And being a smart ass as Gene is, he asks which corner Perfect will be in, but obviously Ric Flair is choosing not to answer. He has this funny look on his face every time he gets asked that question. So we don't know. We don't know.
They kept the suspense going for later in the show, which was good. But once again, similar to you and me and Gene, I was thinking, why is he dressed for action here, or what's going to happen? And I guess we'll find out later on. Probably still doesn't explain why he's dressed with the robe and stuff, but it's Ric Flair. He does what he wants, right? Next, we move on to your favorite wrestler, Wax. It's the man called Virgil.
I wouldn't call him my favorite wrestler. I think there was a terrible Virgil promo before the match. I'm not even going to say what it was about because it was garbage, right? But the funny thing about I thought the match before it even started is Bobby Heenan. He goes, "You're not going to see much wrestling here," on the commentary, which was hilarious because it's very true. There was very little wrestling, and it was mostly just Nailz just bossing around Virgil and the ring,
choking him. Yeah, that was pretty much it.
That's pretty much all it was. Nailz refusing to sell.
Virgil was over, Wax. Virgil was so over. But I think everyone was over in the show, but this is the last time where he's going to get pops like this.
Yeah. Well, and no wonder with the demolition that it was of this match. Nailz refusing to sell anything. He was gassed within a few minutes. No surprise that his career was short-lived as well in the WWE.
Well, I think they had bigger plans for Nailz. We'll get to that. I think Nailz' own behind-the-scenes indiscretions caused that. But you know what I loved about this match? It wasn't anything that was going on in the ring. It was Bobby Heenan's commentary. Because if you're a British fan, and I didn't appreciate that at this time, I was watching it again, and it's hilarious the kind of stuff he's saying. He's talking about cricket, Wax, and we are cricket lovers. You have another podcast, which is cricket focused, called The Middle Order. I'll do a little plug for that. I'm on it as well when we do run it. And he's talking about things like Nailz sees Virgil's head as a cricket ball, and he talks about how he's going to hit him, and he talks about knocking the wickets off, and then he talks about a soccer kick. So he's having a lot of fun here, and I was really impressed with the fact that Bobby Heenan went there and did his research into the game of cricket as a man from the US who knows baseball. So I thought, he's great throughout the night, but for a terrible match, absolute stinker. I know we're not doing formal ratings here, but this is a dud, right? His commentary, go back and listen to it. It's hilarious.
Absolutely. That moves us on to one of two segments that Lord Alfred Hayes will be doing on the show. And again, terribly done from a guy who's normally a lot better than this, right? But the way that he was asked to do this obviously was not great. But anyway, he's standing outside Macho Man's changing room, and he says he cannot confirm the rumor that Mr. Perfect is in that changing room, and he makes a point of trying to open the door, but it's locked and there's no answer coming from inside, and he's just making out that, well, why would it be locked? Well, it's the changing room for a start, Lord Alfred Hayes. So I don't think you should be surprised there. But anyway, we're building up that tension or expectation of Mr. Perfect being somewhere in the building.
You know what was interesting here? Like I said, it was a terrible segment, but then it got me thinking. To Bash at the Beach 1996, we covered that in one of our specials, and you had the same thing going on there with Mean Gene, if you remember, trying to get into the Outsiders dressing room. So they actually lifted a bit of that from this. So just the kind of parallels you draw. But yeah, in terms of Lord Alfred Hayes, he's been better than this, but I guess he was playing the sleuth and trying to kind of continue to build up the hype. But yeah, it was a nothing segment.
Let's move on to our third match, Fash. It's Rick Martel versus Shawn Michaels, two of the better workers in the business at the time. Sherri looking just like Sherri can in an interview with Gene before the match. She's the sort of recapping the story as to how they got there and the whole point of no hitting in the face, and that they both agreed. Hilariously, Rick Martel comes out in full tennis gear, reference to Wimbledon there, I think.
Yeah.
And Sherri then comes out with Shawn Michaels, and an outfit that's more raunchy than you would see even on modern day television.
What an outfit!
Yeah,
you have to see this to believe it. And there's lots of quips from Bobby Heenan and Vince McMahon in relation to this. And as young boys watching this, just go and watch it, and you'll see how it's eye opening. And if you think about it, that crowd had a lot of kids in it, and so it was. Pretty extreme for the time. But you know what I loved about this, Wax? You talk about Rick Martel coming out in the kind of tennis gear, and Vince McMahon hits a great line here. He says, "Someone is going to be broken in love," which I thought was a great pun from him. But then he let himself down, because I'm sure instead of Wimbledon, he says Wimbledon. So I'm not sure if Vince McMahon is a big tennis fan and he wasn't just reading a cue card or something. But yeah, I mean, this was unique. We've mentioned this in our previous episode when we're doing the build up to this event. It was a heel versus heel dynamic, and the crowd didn't really know how to react to this.
Yeah, I thought they worked quite well together, at least in the first half of the match. Shawn Michaels took a great bump over the top rope, landing on his side. You don't really see that. People land on their feet or knees go down softly, but he landed on the side, going over the top rope. Martel then, hitting on Sherri outside the ring, hugs her, and both guys with plenty of heel moves, using the hair, using the tights.
But they're sticking to the rule, right? They're trying to avoid hitting one another in the face, which they both agreed to, and they're building up this tension of actually one of them is not going to stick to this. Yeah,
we'll come to that. We get to see a lot more of the Rick Martel's backside than I think we wanted to see during the match. Things start to get heated outside the ring with Sherri getting involved. And they're about, I think there's a slap to one. Shawn slaps Rick Martel, or Rick Martel slaps Shawn, and that causes Sherri to faint. Yeah, it was a bit of a mess there after, actually. I thought they ruined a reasonable match with the ending. Anyway, Sherri pretending she's fainted, the two guys in the middle getting more and more heated, and that's when they start lashing out with punches, and they end up fighting down the aisle, leaving Sherri sort of on the side of the ring. They both get counted out, so it's a double count out finish. I think Shawn comes back to get Sherri, and Rick Martel comes, tries to knock them over, has a bucket of water. Just real,
let's slow down a bit.
Real silly comedy.
I know you hate it, that's why you're just bitching, but yeah, essentially Shawn is trying to carry her back. Martel stops her, then Martel's trying to carry her back. Shawn stops him, and then as Shawn's taking him, Martel comes out. He's got a bucket of water. He's playing to the crowd, saying, "Shall I do it?" The crowd's popping. He plays it too long, probably, and then he throws the pile of water on Sherri, and that's the big ending to this match. And the crowd pops, and it's a kind of comedy ha-ha match with Sherri. Actually, I thought her little feint, that was well played by her, but I guess two really talented workers, and we didn't see the best of them. What we did see was good. But yeah, it then turns into what it's meant to be, comedy. And actually, there's no follow-up to this match either. So it's kind of just for this event and they go their separate ways. And I guess this goes back to our previous episode when we said how Shawn was supposed to take on Bret Hart and that didn't happen. But I thought what we got was good. It's a shame they never got to have a proper match later on at some point. They didn't really connect again. But yeah, I mean, I think it was, I found it in parts funny, but it's one of those things where it should have been much better if it was just a kind of a normal match. But heel versus heel doesn't work in this time period. And you'd argue maybe at times it doesn't work now. So that's why I had the comedy element in it and all being about Sherri.
Yeah.
And then Sherri having literally water in her face at the end.
Well, as the Nasty Boys put it, did you see the mascara running off the dog's face? It was like an oil slick on the tail.
And this is why the Nasty Boys will always be losers in my eyes, because
Man, come on,
they'd be lucky to have Sherri as their manager, but they're just too nasty and, you know.
Anyway, the reason I mentioned them is because they have a little promo after this match. Obviously, we didn't get to see their match, but the Nasty Boys are making it clear that they want a title shot. And that pretty much leaves it there. We're not done with the tag team division yet. The next match is the Natural Disasters versus the Beverly Brothers. Two tag teams that I think both of us would say we're not big fans of. But I'm going to say this, Fash. I didn't hate it. I thought this was all right. I thought the Natural Disasters were, pretty decent for two guys of their size. And if this was the Andersons against the Rock and Roll Express doing the exact same moveset as these two,
are you trying
they'd get 4 stars?
Are you trying to say the Natural Disasters could be compared to them and Beverly Brothers could be compared? I think there was too many rest holds here, Wax. It was a lot of, I think, Typhoon taking punishment. There was too much of that. And then I think it picked up. I mean, later on, we'd learn that these guys were actually a pretty serious tag team in the AWA, the Beverly Brothers. But here they're presented as a bit of a joke. The Genius is their manager. We had no idea he was the Macho Man's brother. But yeah, it was okay. I didn't really like it. I thought it was, obviously, you could tell this was not as hot as the opener. No. LOD were more over. But yeah, for what it was fine given the teams. This wasn't originally supposed to be the tag team title match, but it was. But for me, it really just came to life really at the end. Earthquake showed why he was a much better worker than Typhoon and really takes the lead, doesn't he, going into the finish of the match?
Yeah, Beverly's getting smashed, right? He's, until Earthquake hits a splash on Typhoon in the corner. That sort of turns the match a little bit, and they're both attacking Typhoon.
Wait. Earthquake hits a splash on Typhoon. You've been on...
By mistake. It's by mistake. It's in the corner, and... at that point, the Beverlys take over for a while. As you mentioned, a lot of rest holds, a lot of Typhoon taking punishment. At one point, Blake uses the metal scroll on the back of Typhoon's head before he then gets the really hot tag to Earthquake. Earthquake moving like a proper athlete throughout this. A beautiful belly-to-belly suplex that even Kurt Angle would be proud of.
Yep.
And it finishes off with the Earthquake splash.
Yeah, he does it well. Yeah, he does it,
but you would not want to take.
You don't want to take, and he does it in a cool because he's coming across ropes, isn't he? He knocks off. I think it's is it Blake Beverly? He knocks off the apron, and then he does the splash to Bo. And I'll be honest, the only reason I challenged you, Wax, was I did not watch this match properly. I literally watched the last 10, 15 seconds of it. And right now I've got it playing in the background. But you better believe I wasn't going to watch this match properly. But I'm glad you did.
One final mention of the tag team division, I think, for the show is that we've got a promo from the Bushwhackers. Why? I have no idea. But the only thing that came to me when I was watching this, I don't remember when I used to watch it, their accents being this strong. Obviously, they're from New Zealand or down under, and they have this really strong accent that is very typical of that place. But I just, for whatever reason, I'd forgotten that they were that strongly New Zealandish.
Yeah, they don't give them. I mean, they had their kind of skits and background stuff, didn't they? But maybe not lots of front end promos. I guess they felt that they sound kind of British here, so let's give them some time. But once again, they'd had their dark match at the beginning, so similar to the Nasty. But at least with the Nasty Boys, there's a story there. They weren't a tag team title shot, and they were starting to play the storyline of Jimmy Hart, Money Inc. Bushwhackers were just talking for the sake of it. I would have liked somebody just come and wipe them out.
Well, I think they had their place in WWF of 1992, especially with this very young audience who I think popped big for the Bushwhackers. I
I
certainly
was
did.
I was
back in the
never a
day.
bushwhacker, but I know you wanted them to lick you in the face back in the day. So yeah, definitely for fans like yourself.
Well, my favorite memory of the Bushwhackers still to this day is them teaming up with Bret Hart in a 6-man tag match. Comes later on this year, I think, in '92 or '93. We'll
I
come
don't
to
know
it.
this match, but I'm sure Brett probably doesn't remember it too fondly.
Probably
But
not.
these guys are the sheep herders, man. Years later, we learned that these guys were original vicious,
Yeah.
blood-hungry heels. And when you look at the Bushwhackers, you would never know that was the case. But I'm sure we'll discuss that probably some day down
Typically,
the line.
Vince has to tame down the act slightly.
Slightly. please check out a sheep herders match, and you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah, let's move on to the next Lord Alfred Hayes promo or segment. This time he's outside the Warriors changing room. Why is he using a David Attenborough voice throughout this, as if he's hunting, a creature about to be exterminated or something?
How do you know David Attenborough is not copying Lord Alfred Hayes?
That's a good point. I might have to go back and see when David Attenborough started his shows. But anyway, he tries to open the door to the Warriors changing room. It gets closed on him before he gets it ajar more than a few centimeters. He says it was a shocking act of rudeness, even though it was him that tried to.
I'm trying to get into someone else's. Yeah, exactly.
Bobby Heenan points out sharply, and that's the end of the local hero, Lord Alfred Hayes, who's I never really recalled him as much until I restarted watching this era of wrestling. And still, I couldn't really point towards all of his backstage influence on the business.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll have to investigate this more. I heard mixed stories later on. If you notice, he's not been honored by WWE since, and I think there was some conflict later on. But yeah, when you go back now, obviously with the promotional announcements, it was always his voice. He would do the update segments. He was on these shows, but slowly he'll be kind of removed over time. But he sticks around, and then he's not been honored by the company. So there's some story there, and we will certainly dig into it in the future. But yeah, that is the last we see of the Lord in this pay-per-view.
Moving on to a very short match, a match that I'm not even sure whether it was aired in the UK or the US or whatnot, which is a surprise considering it was Crush's first big match on a big event. Crush versus Repo Man is what it was. A very one-sided affair of Crush absolutely demolishing Repo Man.
Demolishing, that's quite a good word there you've used, Wax. Did you mean to use that? Because that was a great segue.
Wins with a crusher. And again, interesting, we talked about this in the past. These guys were once part of a tag team, Demolition, of course. And
this man, Demolition Smash, is Repo Man, as we've established. And yes, Crush was the third member of Demolition. Crush. And kids like us who hadn't really seen that fully didn't have a clue. And I think most people didn't even recognize this at the time, but this was Demolition actually taking each other on after being partners in 1991. So really odd, but as you say, a one-sided squash, really establishing Crush. And going back to your point, I don't remember watching this in the version of SummerSlam 92 that I saw. Maybe it was in the live one, but certainly the cut that I saw, it wasn't there and it wasn't shown in the US. But I guess it was really there to establish Crush. Once again, Repo Man was feuding with the Bulldog, and he's just kind of a jobber here. So maybe we establish here that he's not really going to go far with this character, unfortunately for him.
Going from one extreme of Smash, this really powerful guy and a really hot tag team, one of the bigger draws at the time, to Repo Man, who's basically a thief, a scaredy cat, if you will. It's just quite a fall from grace, or just crazy extremes.
Yeah, and Barry Darso's career is not really going to recover. He's going with WCW, various gimmicks there. It doesn't really work. And as you said, once LOD came in, we've talked about this in the archives. Check them out. Vince McMahon just ruined Demolition. This character, as you say, is a little bit comedic here, but initially it had a bit of a dark undertone. And then we've talked about the angle with the British Bulldog, which was pretty graphic. But by this point, and we're going to see going into 1993, the character's not really going to go anywhere aside from a few matches here and there. But yeah, the match was there to establish Crush. Got a really strong pop. I know everyone's getting pops here, but he did. And at this point, if you were just watching this, you'd probably think Crush is going to be a big deal in the coming years, a potential main eventer, the way he was presented and the kind of characters we were seeing in the company at this time.
Yeah, he certainly seemed like he had a steep upwards curve, for the next few months thereafter, before it all seemed to sort of fall away very quickly. We'll talk about that, obviously. So we're more than halfway through the show. The crowd's on fire. The setting looks amazing. The wrestling maybe has not been, great, but it never really was in the early 90s. What are your sort of thoughts at this stage of this show?
Yeah, as we get close to our first kind of big match, I mean, I enjoyed it at the time. Obviously, we loved it at the time. Watching it again with a more critical eye, I still think it was entertaining. But there was a lot of matches in there that just there to fill things up. Like I say, the opener LOD was great to see them. The match was okay. Nailz, Virgil, dud. The other matches that we've seen so far, I mean, like say Shawn Michaels, Martel had potential. What we saw, I think, was good, but we didn't see enough of it. So I think it's just right now, it needs something to really ignite it. But I think we always talk about this, Wax. The crowd makes the event, and because the crowd didn't miss a beat, I mean, they were loud throughout. I think whatever we were seeing, you're engrossed. If this was a show that had a rubbish crowd, I think you would have felt more. But I was enjoying it just because of the environment that this was all happening in, and just seeing these characters again, and probably a peak moment for a number of them. So to me, it was kind of okayish if we're looking at a critical eye. But yeah, the best was still to come.